Okay, so we have we've read a number of methodological descriptions in ethnographic monographs, and so as I've said before, this is a really nice way to get our head around the art of ethnographic research. Some tasks are primarily science, others are arts, and I would say that ethnography is something which is more of an art. It is something that needs to be practiced. It is something where you can express your individuality, and so we are trying to think about research methods, specifically ethnographic research methods, in a slightly different way by considering how the authors of ethnographic monographs have explained their experience of fieldwork, have explained the research methods employed to collect the right type of data which will allow them to answer their research question. And most ethnographic research questions are descriptive in nature, describing specific cultural, religious, linguistic, ethnic, nationalistic, political phenomenon. And so our next book that we're going to consider, we've been to Singapore and now we are going to Pakistan. So we've been to Singapore, we've been to India, where this Western woman immediately after September 11th had this long battle to try and get access to women Islamic schools for young women. And this book is written by Magnus Marsden, and it is based on fieldwork way up in the north of Pakistan, in a place called Chitra, and that is way north of Peshawar. I haven't been there, but it's real far north, way up in the mountains. And this is a lovely book. You can see by the books that I've chosen that one of my particular interests is in the anthropology of Islam. And let's go to full screen now, and let's just go through some of the important material, some of the important details that he mentions. He describes the book being what it means to live a Muslim life in the Chitral region of northern Pakistan, and he describes where that is, and he describes the book's main focus is on two localities in Chitral, a village and a small town. Its chief concern is with the commitment shown by many Chitral Muslims in the living of intellectually vibrant and emotionally significant lives in the region. And he does this by documenting with critical dimensions of the everyday life. It seeks to illuminate aspects of Muslim life both within and beyond South Asia. Okay, so let's go down. He has a section. I made my first visit to Chitral in 1995, and over the course of the next 8 years of my fieldwork amongst the Kolwa speaking people of this remote and beautiful region, it took me to exuberant week-long polo exhibition tournaments, and he mentions all the experiences that he had. He first went to the region as a 18-year-old school leaver in order to teach for 12 months in a small fee-paying English medium school. So he arrived as a young man. He first went when he was 18. And in September 1996, he started an undergraduate degree in Cambridge, and over the course of the next 3 years, he made 3 further 3-month visits to Chitral, and he provides details about when these were. Between April 2000 and 2010, he conducted 18 months of formal PhD fieldwork in Chitral. In addition, having completed my PhD, he made a further 3 visits to Chitral between March and April 2002, and again 2003, and later on in 2003, 3 approximately 3-month visits. Much of the material presented in this book was collected during my 18 months of formal PhD fieldwork, yet it draws deeply on the experiences, memories, reflections of earlier visits I made to Chitral. The relationships I established during my prolonged stay in this region were diverse. Some of them were structured around my status as a foreign researcher. Many of the people whose views, attitudes and lifestyles I explore in detail in this book, and I've just lost had known me since my post-school days and corresponded with me for up to 5 years before I started the formal research on which this book is based. Many of his friends had encouraged me to do a PhD about Muslim life in the region, and they spent much time sitting in houses, gardens and villages discussing the dimensions of Chitral society and about the various forms of influence, outside influence, Afghan Taliban, Pakistan, Islamist parties, for example. During initial stays in Chitral, I also set about learning, with the help of village people, the Korwa language. Many of my friends claimed they could not understand why I wanted to learn such a useless language, and that I would be better off teaching them English. Yet when I did achieve a degree of fluency, I was often told that the form of Chitral I spoke like that of the Raushan people themselves was its purest and most authentic form, and was unlike that spoken by the people from Chitral and other towns. So language learning was a very, very important part of Magnus's fieldwork experience. Long-established connections with Chitral people meant that I was able to interact with a wide array of people than usually possible for male anthropologists working in rural Muslim communities. During the early visits I made to Chitral, I lived with a family, and I attended weddings, funerals and musical gatherings, not only in the village in which I was living, but in many other surrounding villages and valleys. So that by the time I returned to conduct my PhD fieldwork, I'd come to be treated as a brother and son of the family with which I had lived. As a result, I was able to sit and converse alone with other family members, with wives and mothers and sisters and daughters and nieces of the household, as well as young and old women. This unusual situation of being allowed access to women's worlds and conversations prompted me to make the gendered dimensions of village life dimensions of Chitral village Muslims' responses to the teachings of reformist Islam central to the arguments presented in the book. So village life he describes the context, snow-capped hills, the importance of picnics and eating outside, the importance of music, of local sport, of the bazaar. So he provides a description of the wider fieldwork context about the things that they particularly liked, the flowers and the local beauty. So this is a very endearing description of the place that he conducted his research in. The villagers whose names I document here also have extensive experience of city life in Pakistan and compared life in Peshawar at universities with village life as well. And he goes on to explain going on tours and road trips again, which are enormously important, perhaps particularly for young men. During his early stays in the region, he also came to recognise the important role of music and poetry and travel played in Muslim life. And he mentions the minibuses and the jeep journeys and the local music that was played on their vehicle tape recorder. This is something that he had a personal interest in, and one which he demonstrates an understanding of, and how this was not something that some Muslim voices in the country were supportive of. He goes on and explains more about the about culture, local culture and dance, and how he spent a great deal of time teaching his friends' children, and how he gave English classes to children in the village, and how he helped them prepare for their own overseas degrees. So this was an exercise in being someone willing to contribute as well as to gain from field work. I also wanted to point out something which some researchers mention in their description. So he spent a lot of time discussing with villagers as he taught them English, played with the children, attended weddings of their friends, helped them water their crops. He went to their houses for meals, and on long cold winter nights sat with them around cold fires, nibbling dried fruit and enjoying some home-brewed red wine. And some of his discussions took part in an exchange of views where they were in tea shops, cracking jokes, laughing, slapping hands were all part of the discussion. In the household of the village women, old and young, educated, uneducated, often vocally participated in conversations with the family. So he's providing description of the places where he was able to access the kind of information that he would need. Most of the friends were serious about their faith. They prayed regularly, sent their children and relatives for religious education in schools in the village and in religious colleges. Yet at the same time, they often did things like drinking local wine or smoking hashish. They were also critical of the region's more conservative Muslims, and so he's providing a nuanced description of the range of informants that he interacted with over the many years that he was involved there. And the reason for doing this, the diverse array of illiterate and literate smallholders, operators of small business, as well as educated middle-class people with professional qualifications who are the focus of the study, are aware that they are living in a world where hostile, stereotypical views of Muslims were persuasive and influential. Chittara Muslims have lively and creative minds, live emotional lives, and are deeply concerned about being swallowed up by an essentialist discourse that stereotypes Muslims as fundamentalists driven by the... and I will leave it there. So this is a wonderful, beautifully detailed account. What's really interesting about this book, and what's really interesting about this particular description of fieldwork, is the way that it went on for a number of years. 18-year-old boy leaves school to do a gap year teaching English in an isolated place, and he uses this amazing opportunity to be teaching English, to learn local languages. He stays with the local families, and after that initial year he comes back and he visits, and then he does a PhD. He stays there for almost 2 years, and then visits after that, and after that, and after that. And so much of anthropological life, it is common that many anthropologists, and I've made this point when talking about Malinowski, so much of what we do happens by accident. Some of the things that happen unintentionally are wonderful surprises. Other times things happen and we are forced to completely redo our topic because what we had planned to do is no longer possible. And so I hope you've enjoyed dipping in to some of the description of fieldwork that Magnus Marsden did in his monograph Living Islam, Muslim Religious Experience in Pakistan's Northern Frontier.